Since the late 1990s, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration has allied with state and local law enforcement agencies to stamp out abuse of the painkiller OxyContin, citing rises in emergency room episodes and overdoses associated with the drug, both of which have been roundly disparaged by critics. The DEA insists its Operation OxyContin is a necessary reaction to the diversion of the prescription narcotic for street use. Unfortunately, despite frequent robberies and burglaries of pharmacies, doctors' offices, and warehouses where prescription medications are stored and sold, the DEA has focused a troubling amount of time and resources on the prescriptions used by practicing physicians. It's easy to see why. Doctors keep records. They pay taxes. They take notes. They're an easier target than common drug dealers. Doctors also often aren't aware of asset forfeiture laws. A physician's considerable assets can be divided up among the various law enforcement agencies investigating him before he's ever brought to trial. Over the last several years, hundreds of physicians have been put on trial for charges ranging from health insurance fraud to drug distribution, even to manslaughter and murder for overprescribing prescription narcotics. Many times investigators seize a doctor's house, office, and bank account, leaving him no resources with which to defend himself. A few doctors have been convicted. Many have been acquitted. Others were left with no choice but to settle. All of this has been happening just as the field of chronic pain management has made some remarkable progress. The development of opium-based narcotics like OxyContin, also known as opioids, has been a godsend to the estimated 30 million Americans who suffer from chronic pain. Opioids are safe, effective, and contrary to conventional wisdom, very rarely lead to accidental addiction when taken properly. Most of the medical literature puts the rate of such addiction at less than 1%. The DEA's campaign puts law enforcement officials in the troubling position of determining what is acceptable medical practice in a field that's dynamic, still emerging, and relatively experimental. The very fact that any course of treatment, quote, beyond the normal practice of medicine, beyond the normal practice of medicine, can be cause for cops to launch a career-ending investigation is enough in itself to stifle innovation in palliative therapy. The high-profile arrests and prosecutions of physicians, up to 200 per year by one estimate, have caused many doctors to underprescribe or refuse to see new patients. It corrupts the candor necessary for an effective doctor-patient relationship. Many physicians have left palliative therapy for less controversial practice. The Village Voice reports that medical schools are now advising students to avoid pain management practice altogether. To calm its critics, the DEA commissioned several pain specialists to work with federal officials to put together a set of guidelines for physicians who treat pain with opioids. These guidelines were posted on the agency's website, and most doctors were led to believe that following the recommendations would keep them safe from prosecution. For a short time, experts, doctors, and drug warriors had reached a compromise. But it didn't last long. Late last year, the guidelines mysteriously disappeared from the DEA's website. And by the way, late last year would be, this is coming out April 5th, 2005. So late last year must be 2004. Their removal coincided with the trial of Virginia pain specialist Dr. William Hurwitz, whose attorneys had attempted and failed to admit the guidelines as evidence on the belief that Hurwitz's practice conformed to their parameters. Hurwitz was eventually convicted and faces a life sentence later this month. A few weeks after Hurwitz's judge refused to admit the guidelines as evidence, the DEA renounced the contents of the brochure, and in a brief explanatory note made clear that the agency wasn't bound by any standards or practices when it came to determining what physicians it would investigate. The agency essentially declared it had carte blanche to launch an inquiry. The renunciation sent shockwaves through the medical community. One doctor told the Washington Post that over 90% of patients and doctors could be subject to prosecution under the DEA's new rules. Rebecca J. Patchen, who serves on the board of the American Medical Association, told the Post, "Doctors hear what's happening to other physicians, and that makes them very reluctant to prescribe opioids that patients might well need." David Joranson, the academic pain specialist who headed up the committee that authored the original guidelines, sent the agency a sharply worded rebuke. 3 professional associations representing pain specialists followed with a letter of their own. And last January, the National Association of State Attorneys General also sent a letter to the DEA expressing concern that the agency was overstepping its bounds and interfering with the legitimate treatment of pain. The letter was signed by 30 AGs from both parties, 30 attorney generals from both parties. That's state attorney generals. The DEA remains obstinate, insisting its revocation of the guidelines did not represent a shift in policy, and that its pursuit of doctors should have no effect on legitimate pain treatment. Despite that, the experts it originally consulted say otherwise. The Attorneys General's letter to the DEA in particular represent a challenge for the Bush administration. The White House claims to value the principles of local rule, states' rights, and federalism, but those principles seem to flitter away when it comes to drug policy. The Justice Department, for example, has repeatedly gone to court to prevent states from allowing physician-assisted suicide and medical marijuana, in some cases going so far as raiding convalescent centers and asserting the supremacy of federal law in prosecuting those who grow marijuana in states where it's permitted. 30 state AGs have said that federal drug policy is interfering with legitimate medical practice. The White House now has 2 choices. It could order the DEA to end its pursuit of physicians and leave a medical policy to state governments and medical boards where it belongs, Or it could stand by the DEA's troubling anti-opioid campaign and watch as more well-intentioned physicians go to jail and millions of Americans continue to endure unnecessary grief. This is Dianne Durfey, and can you tell us what you think people should know to before we introduce the case?
Well, I think it's this particular story is a very complicated story in a way, but I think what it all comes down to is a Department of Justice that's out of control. What happened in our case is at one point we had heard many doctors, not pain management specialists, just general practitioners in the area. We were living in Panama City, which is on the panhandle of Florida. And a number of doctors there were being arrested. And we had no reason not to believe that they were not selling drugs. That's what they were accused of.
Recreational drugs, or for recreational purposes?
Well, they never said that. I went to one of the trials, but the jury nonetheless found that the criteria is supposed to be that in order to find the doctor guilty, they have to have, the prosecution has to have proven that the doctor was prescribing these drugs for illegal or recreational purposes.
Right. That he was negligent.
This was never really, no, not negligent even, that he knowingly and intentionally was selling them for illegal or recreational purposes. It was never, as far as I know, I only know about a couple of the cases. I went to one which well, this was after my husband, they broke into his office and ransacked his office, the FBI and DEA, and took all of his files, etc.
Let's use this point to say, what was your husband's background? Can you review his medical career?
Yes, he was a pain management specialist. He went to TMI, Texas Military School in San Antonio, Texas. He was from Springfield, Ohio, and actually his father was a very prominent attorney in Springfield and president of the Ohio Bar Association. He went to Amherst, where he graduated cum laude. He was also valedictorian at his high school. From Amherst, he went to Columbia and received his MD at Columbia University. After that, he interned at Cincinnati General here. Then he returned to, he took some courses at St. Vincent. He returned to Columbia with a residency in anesthesia. Then he spent part of his residency at Mass General, in Harvard, where he studied under one of the pioneers in pain medicine, Henry Beecher.
About what year would that be? Just roughly.
Okay, it was, I can tell you almost exactly. It was 60 and 61.
So since 1961, he has dedicated himself to the study of pain.
No, not necessarily.
No.
He went from there and he was teaching at Ohio State here, living in Columbus, and at the same time he was taking courses in toxicology and doing research work and writing papers on the effects of oxygen deprivation or something on the lungs. So he has an honorary fellowship in the Chest Physicians Organization. It's honorary.
So
for his work that he did on that.
In toxicology?
No, not in toxicology. On the effect of oxygen, or it was something that NASA would be able to use on the oxygen or oxygen deprivation. I'm not sure.
I see.
On the lungs, but I know it had to do with the lungs. That's how he got the honorary thing in chest surgery fellowship. And after that, then he worked, he did anesthesia for Dr. DeBakey in Texas, who was the famous heart surgeon for a while. And then he's been, I think, in private practice. He worked for the FAA in Washington, D.C.
Did you live in Washington?
I wasn't married to him then.
I see.
I knew him then. But we weren't married. We went through other marriages and finally ended up together 11 years ago.
And then went to Florida? Is that where you met the Cheshires?
Yes.
I see.
Yes,
in Panama
indeed.
City.
Indeed. They live in Panama City, as you know. They were up here recently because Julie is from Dayton. So
Right.
they were here. We had a little party for them. It was...
No, we almost came to the party, but
well, why didn't you?
We were working on my website up in Columbus. I had a chance to.
Well, we went through. I belong to the Decorative Arts Society here, and at my suggestion, they set up one of our traveling day trips in Dayton, and we went through Julie's family ancestral home, and also another home that they started. They founded National Cash Register, as I'm sure you know. So the family, the ancestral home, is a very nice colonial. But then there's another one that's very grand. The
Patterson Homestead?
Yeah, no, the Patterson Homestead is the one. It's not simple, but it's not overly grand the way the second house is, which was a later house and later generations.
Yeah,
so
that's when probably John H. was rolling in the bucks.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you know, at the art museum, her grandmother founded that, who was also a Julia.
Right. We were kind of anxious with John Cheshire to have a science panel about global warming, and I had notified people at the Bird Polar Research Center and nobody would come and do it. They all passed the buck up to Lonnie Thompson, who wasn't available. So I'm very curious to hear your story, because it seems like you're outlining a man who had good scientific background and stature in the community.
Oh, yes. And, well, but you see, they need to go after someone who's susceptible. I assume that the other doctors, well, they're going after doctors all across the country, but this group down in North Florida in the Panhandle are particularly zealous to get doctors. And as you'll read there, Congress was after the DEA because they're not arresting a lot of drug dealers, big drug dealers. So they're threatening to cut their funds. So the DEA decided that the thing to do would be to go after, they need to make headlines too. So they can go after doctors, and then immediately upon an indictment, they confiscate all your assets. All of them.
So what happened? So the first wind you had that something was amiss.
They broke
the
into his office. Yes, and took everything and treated his office manager and him as though they're criminals, you know, and called. He had patients waiting and says, "Oh, look at the drug addicts." Some of them, I mean, they were furious. Wow. So.
In broad daylight.
Oh yes. So we thought, well,
kind of
this is a mistake, So I hired an attorney, and he put us onto a private investigator who found out a number of things. Then we got another attorney who specialized in this. He's in Washington, D.C. And we spent a lot of money on that. And then we received that letter from Dr. Trescott, who's a top pain management specialist. Oh, and John's education. Then he went on to UVA, University of Virginia, and Vanderbilt. Later in life, he did anesthesia for a long time. Later in life, and took more courses in pain management. And most pain management specialists are either neurologists or anesthesiologists because it's a natural progression. We got this letter from Dr. Trescott, who's a top. And I said to the lawyers, why don't we send this into the assistant U.S. attorney, and he'll see that this is not, that this is the way it is. And they said, oh, no, we don't want to show our hand. And a friend of the Cheshires and a friend of ours, another doctor, wrote to the two senators in Florida, and they said they'd be glad to intercede. But that we had to, John had to sign a thing saying that it was okay for them to look at the evidence. And the two attorneys then told us, no, because and I don't know if this is true or not. No, you don't want to do that because you never know which way they're politicians, and they could go either way. They would just use it whatever serves them the best. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's true. But I mean, after the fact, I thought about this letter, and I thought, why would they say we don't want to show our hand? When are we going to show it? Is this at trial? I mean, my feeling now is that these lawyers wanted to go to trial. They must have assumed we had some money somewhere. I mean, outside of where the feds could find it. But we weren't hiding money. So I went to the trial of another doctor. I've been following these things. And
because you realize you better figure out what's going on.
Figure out what's going on. Well, first of all, his defense attorney, and this was one they paid for. His defense attorney was horrible, hadn't done his homework. But nonetheless, my feeling was this: one of it, a lot of the patients that they accused him of because they died. One woman had taken all of her meds, her husband's meds, and drank as much vodka as she could get down. I don't see where that is the doctor's fault. because, and a lot of people in severe pain, unless the doctor can really work to control that pain, commit suicide.
Right.
Why not?
Right.
I mean, this is chronic pain.
Right.
This isn't pain that you have and you take meds and in a couple of weeks it goes. This is pain that, like for a failed laminectomy, where they have pain for the absolute remainder of their lives.
Wow.
There are some people
So
like
these
that.
were some of the people he had in his clinic.
Yes.
It's so sad to think they'd be deprived because
Well,
other
they are
doctors,
being deprived
other
now.
doctors are
You
terrified.
might talk to Siobhan Reynolds at the Pain Relief Network, PRN.
And you said the New York Times is following your case, though.
No, not ours.
No?
No. John Tierney is following, he followed the Hurwitz case. That's one that they made a big hoo-ha about that and how many pills he prescribed. And it went up on appeal, and it was put back. They had to do a new trial. And at the new trial, all the top pain management people and all of the, and he got pro bono, because, they taken all his money too, two of the top law firms in the country. And I followed that, and the judge was a good judge. She threw out all of the deaths, and she instructed the jury, and I was talking via email to his lead lawyer. And they went out, and I said, "Oh, this is a slam dunk." And he said, "Yeah." And the jury went out, and this is one of the problems with a jury trial, because this is what happened at the one I went to. The government, I'll tell you some of the tricks they used, too, to get a guilty verdict. They went out, and a day or two later, they can come back, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "You don't think it's going to be a hung jury?" He said, "Don't even mention it." Counts, 100 and some counts in the indictment. And they always do a lot of them, which, confuses the jury. So after this, John Tierney, check his blogs in the New York Times. He covered that trial, and he went, check his blogs, they're excellent. And he talked to some of the jurors, and he said, "Well, why did you find him guilty on?" They found him guilty on, I think, 16 counts, not guilty on 17, and were hung on the rest. And they said, "Well, there were so many counts. We didn't think he meant to do it, but there were so many counts. We figured he had to have done something." See, that's one of the things. You throw enough stuff, and they hope it sticks.
What year was that trial?
This was 2006.
2006.
January of 2006.
And
well, no,
was
there was no trial. My husband did not go to trial. But this was another doctor. Hurwitz was just earlier.
Hurwitz went to trial.
Hurwitz went to his second trial, and that was before my husband pleaded, because this is one of the things that I said, it's hopeless. If Hurwitz can't, when he had everything going for him, and the judge did say you have to believe that he knowingly and intentionally prescribed these for illegal or recreational purposes. If he had that going for him and they still found him guilty, there's just no hope anywhere. And on the trial that I went to, which was Tom Merrill's trial, I went in thinking he was probably guilty, and that they just made a mistake with my husband. But that's the one that I told you where the one patient had taken all of her meds and her husband's, and they found him guilty of that. And of course, the jury doesn't know what the penalty is. Now, when they find him guilty of a death, that's life.
Right.
He's in for life. Hurwitz, because
You mean your husband or Hurwitz?
Merrill. Hurwitz, because for the first, trial, he was in for life. The second one, he went back where he had all the wonderful lawyers and this and that. He'd been in jail for a number of years. And the judge, who was really on his side, because she's the one who threw out all the death sentences and instructed the jury so that one couldn't imagine how they could find him guilty the way her instructions were. But they did anyway. The feds then came after me, but John didn't plead, so they have a way of squeezing people. So the first I knew of it, they subpoenaed my daughter.
So October 2005 was the first wind that you had that something was very, very amiss?
And they arrested him in December of 2006.
So for 1 year you were going to trials to figure out what was happening?
What was happening. We had these lawyers, and then, you know, we had all this evidence that...
What were they saying then? They raided the office in 2005?
Then they don't say anything.
And they insulted the patients. They said, you're all drug addicts.
Yes.
And then all the patients are going, what is going on? And so then a stir goes throughout the community, and people
it
are
had
kind of
been
terrorized.
Throughout the community. It's like...
It already happened a few years before, but always other doctors? You didn't think it could happen to you?
No.
And now you realize probably none of the doctors were doing anything.
I believe that maybe there's one that I know of that I think the people in the medical community talked about him.
That he was abusing his
maybe
access.
He was abusing.
So then 1 year goes by, you're going to different trials to try to understand?
Just one.
Just one.
And the other one I followed on the internet. But do read John Tierney's blog or call the Times and ask them how you can read it. Because he covered the Hurwitz trial. He did op-ed columns too initially. So that's pretty...
But then, so now the lawyers that you got, even when you had good letters that would have been strong evidence in support of your husband, they didn't want to use them right away? They said, don't show your hand?
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like your lawyers were on your side either.
Doesn't sound like it, does it?
It's in retrospect.
And then when they took all of our money, all of our assets, and they
Who's they?
We had the feds, yeah. And we had to get a public defender.
Wow.
And I don't think he was on our side either. I think he just didn't want. In order to defend something like this, it takes so much research and backgrounding that, you know, and he's not getting... I called attorneys, our attorneys, the minute, when the indictment came down, or when they arrested him. I called them right away. They arrested him here. And
arrested him here in this condo?
Yes. They were downstairs. This is...
How shocking.
This is
like
another shocking
Germany
thing.
Or something.
Oh, it's absolutely. We were packing to go to back to Panama City. This is Kevin so-and-so. I just arrested your husband. And so we had an arraignment here, and the judge here said he couldn't. I had written to the prosecutor, the U.S. attorney, saying that we were moving to Cincinnati, and if they wanted to see us, if they wanted to arrest John, to let Harry Harper, who was our lawyer in Panama City, let him know, and we would be down there he would, submit himself for arrest.
So now by 2006 or 2007, you decided to retire from the pain management?
He retired, yes. Well, he was 70. He was, oh God, he's turning 79 this year.
But see, doctors get better with more experience. I can see why they wouldn't want to retire. He knew his patients.
He knew his patients, and these are long-term patients.
And these are people who are depending on him.
So he was, I guess, 77 then. But they always retire doctors who are in practice on their own. I mean, they always arrest doctors who are in practice on their own, go for them, and who are older. That seems to be what they like to do. And now,
well, you just mean within the past 5 years, not 20 or 30 years ago.
No, within the past 5 years. This is a whole new thing, yes, that's going on. As Tierney says, because the DEA doesn't want to go after real illegal drug dealers.
Who have guns and might hurt back.
Yes, and their money's offshore. So I called our lawyers, the two of them, and and they said, well, you have to put $250,000 down, and it's probably going to cost you $1 million. I said, they've taken our assets, we don't have $1 million. You must have money somewhere. We can't represent you if you don't. And they dumped us. Thank you very much. Wow. So we had this public defender.
Now, back in Panama City, you surely through all these years have some type of friends in political circles.
Oh, absolutely.
And what were they?
Political circles can't do anything. We had him in Bay County, and one I won't say, but he was a very important member of the politics in Bay County, and he said, this is ridiculous, no, don't forget who I am and we'll get you out of this. And then he realized it was a federal thing. He said,
so these were state political people?
County.
So county and state.
And they can't do anything.
So this is like state versus federal?
They can't do anything with the federal.
Wow.
No, what?
How about,
we had letters from people,
how about
top doctors, which I don't know. It's
state
just,
senators, anybody in the federal
They
level?
said they would be happy to review his charts, the evidence. But our lawyers at the time told us, no. If John would sign a thing letting them do it, said, no, don't. You can't do that because they're political and you never know what they're going to do or say.
Well, they
now, the FBI woman called me about 3 weeks ago and to say that, she said, I have some of your husband's private things, some drawings he'd made when he was in medical school, and some of his certificates and this and that. Are you still at the same address? Shall I send it? I said, yes, we're still at the same address. I said, why are you going to arrest me now? Because they, I was telling you this, they subpoenaed my daughter. That's the first I had any clue. Down to Tallahassee to the grand jury, because they were trying to say that I had hidden money.
The feeling of,
of
who these are, because this sounds like even a rogue element, even of the federal government.
It is, I think.
You don't want to put a slur on our entire government. That's all.
Just the DOJ. Well, there are, but
the
I think there need to be checks and balances because these people can do whatever they want.
sounds like they not only wanted your husband out of the way and other doctors like him out of the way.
No, they didn't want him out of the way. They wanted to show that they were arresting drug dealers, but they're arresting doctors, not drug dealers.
So this is
there
just
are
a
five
quota?
doctors who've been arrested and found guilty and jailed, whatever, down in the Panhandle, and there's one drug dealer.
Okay, so we know, like, crack cocaine is a very bad problem. Now, that's not coming from any pain clinic, crack
No,
cocaine.
it's
What are they doing
legal
about
drugs,
crack cocaine?
oxycodone, OxyContin, fentanyl, you know,
I'm just trying to hear
drugs to manage pain.
What,
Cocaine is an illegal drug.
I understand, but it seems to me there's a lot of political pressure. People know in society that drugs are around. They see the ravishing of the neighborhoods and so on. So they're sending out a message, do something about this. Law and order, law and order. So my question to you is, if the worst drugs are out there, it seems like this is a quota thing, that they want to say, this is the cause of our social demise, doctors overprescribing? Is that what the quota is about?
I'm not sure if that's what they're saying, but they just want to show that they are going after, trying to solve the drug problem. And now the bad news for them, though, is they've arrested so many doctors down in North Florida, it's no longer on the front pages. So I don't know what they're going to do.
What do you mean? But what about the people who need the services of these doctors? They're probably terrified to prescribe pain pills.
They are. They are. Talk to Siobhan Reynolds.
So a lot of people are in pain. And before we changed tapes, we were talking about some of the possible motives to make life so difficult for your husband. Do you want to review what your latest thoughts are on that?
Well, I think I don't understand why they were so much nastier in his regard than for the other doctors who have far more evidence against them. When he was arrested in Ohio, he needed to go back to Florida, and they took him to a number of different jails all across the country for like 2-day stints. And it was weeks before he finally ended up in Florida. Now, since that time, I've learned that that's called dieseling. And they do that to soften up drug dealers. He's a 78-year-old man. What are they going to soften him up? I'm surprised.
What does that mean, soften up?
I don't know. So that so
that you're demoralized? And
demoralize them, yes.
You just cave in and say my patients didn't really need pain pills, or I'll stop giving pain pills?
Listen. So they did that to him. Then he got into the Panama City jail, and was it there or was it in Marianna? I mean, he's been in so many jails all the time. And they put him in with a guy who was a murderer who'd killed his girlfriend by cutting her head off. And he was teasing John and stealing his stuff and making fun of him for being old and saying he's going to kill him and all kinds of things. John was terrified of him.
Yeah.
And then they went
That's
after...
like cruel and unusual punishment,
Yes,
isn't it?
they went after me. And his lawyer said on the telephone, my lawyer was on the other line, said that unless John pleaded guilty, that he could guarantee that they would indict me, they would arrest me, and they would put me in jail until trial. Now, about 3 weeks ago, the FBI woman called. I told you that before. And I said, are you going to put me in jail? Are you going to arrest me? Now, she said, no, we never were. That was in the plea agreement. because they were threatening us. She said, we never were. I said, what do you mean you never were? I said, you subpoenaed my poor daughter, who dragged her down to Tallahassee. Well, we thought we had a lead on some evidence, and we have to follow it through. But when it went before the grand jury, we realized that there wasn't any evidence against her.
And there's no apology?
Nothing.
For all of the psychological
She
damage?
maintains that she never saw that letter.
Which one?
From the doctor, from the pain management
From the pain
physician.
center. Let me just read it for people. It says, to whom it may concern, I was asked by Dr. Durfey to review a variety of his cases. I've specifically reviewed the case of William Woods, Senior Mary Lockney, Janelle Refuse, Ivy Bailey, Eva Edmondson, David Harrison, and Stan Furlow. These records appear to meet the appropriate standard of care and did not reflect a deviation from standard medical practice. And this man has huge credentials after him.
It's a woman.
Oh,
yeah.
this woman, Andrea Trescott. Amazing. And so this meant nothing in the court?
They maintain they never saw it. So John did plead guilty, and his lawyer said, oh, he'll probably only get about 5 years. He pled guilty to, I think, 6 counts of fraud.
Why would he plead guilty if he didn't do anything that he's guilty of? I mean, I kind of know the answer, but my viewers...
Well, the answer is because otherwise they were threatening to arrest me. They were treating him very badly in the jail.
Excuse me, why would they arrest you? What grounds could they arrest you?
Saying that I was hiding money.
So that's grounds for arrest, hiding money?
Yes.
Even though he's being...
Yes. I can't hide money.
No,
so that they can't get it. See, they confiscated all our assets, so they're maintaining...
It sounds so unconstitutional.
That I've been trying to hide it. I don't know if it's unconstitutional or not. Also, as his lawyer said, they're always found guilty. And if he's found guilty,
this I know.
He is looking at life. So his lawyer said he thought probably maximum he'd get is 5 years. So he pled guilty.
And this was the same lawyer that said not to show this letter because you didn't want to show him?
No, this was the public defender.
Oh, the public defender. Okay.
So,
so now we are in 2007.
Yes.
And your husband has been arrested, shuffled around to different jails in Cincinnati and down in Florida. He's 78 years old at this point, 77?
He'll be he's 70. He'll be 79 October. This coming October.
This is 2008, so.
In 2007.
It's 2006. He would have been 2 years younger, so he's still.
He was 77.
Should be treated with more respect than that.
I would think so. And we had letters. So he went through the thing where he pled guilty, and then they were waiting for the sentencing, and his lawyer's still saying, oh, we'll probably only get maximum 5 years. 2 days before he's to go for his sentencing, we're all planning to go there, his lawyer...
This was in Florida?
Yes, emailed me up here that it looks like he'll get 17 years. I said, what are you talking about?
Do you think the public defender knew when he told you he would probably get only maximum 5 years that he knew?
He was hoping for that. I don't know what he knew.
Because how did he know before sentencing that
he
they
was
were looking
guessing. He was guessing
what
at
changed?
that,
What
particularly after Hurwitz's thing. She gave him 20.
I know.
The
But
judge.
but what I'm
and
saying
she
is,
started railing at the medical establishment, and it was to teach him the medical establishment a lesson.
and what's the lesson? To keep people in pain?
I guess, yes.
Wow.
These are all new things. The DEA had on the internet, and they had listing of standards for this. What This Dr. Trescott wrote standards. She was the main author of standards for treatment of pain with opioids, pain management with opioids. And the DEA had that. It was on the internet, and the 2 days before Dr. Hurwitz's trial, they pulled it off and said there are no standards, it's whatever they decided to be or whatever. So, and the extraordinary thing is that this doctor and John have such high credentials, and they get the same guy in who's Dr. Perrin, who's an addictionologist, I think, but he just got, you know, he's an internist, and he went for a couple of courses or something in addictionology. He's never been into pain management or treated pain patients. 40-some state attorneys general wrote a letter to the Department of Justice saying that this is not within the realm of the federal government. And the pharmacists, the American Association of Pharmacists said the DEA saying that this is wrong. They don't pay, they just keep on going.
But it just sounds criminal what had happened in the name of justice.
It is.
Who is coming to your defense now? Who is being outraged? Who's stepping up to the plate? Writing letters? Where are they writing letters? What is the most
a friend
hopeful?
of ours just the other day presented a paper at the Literary Club in Cincinnati. As you know, John Cheshire wrote a letter to the editor in Panama City.
But there's not a strong office to prosecute for the people.
No.
Is there?
Oh, no. No.
Okay.
It's mainly the only people who are coming to the defense are, and you ask any lawyer and they say that it's wrong.
Can I go and see your husband? Can I be cleared?
I think you might be.
I would write a letter. You'll show me where, and
I'll show you where it should go.
And how often are you seeing your husband now?
I just saw him yesterday.
And what are his spirits like?
He's still very hopeful. They just sent in an appeal for ineffectual counsel, but then my lawyer here, I called him on it. He didn't bill me.
He wasn't as hopeful?
He said those are always. He was so shocked when they first of all, he was shocked at the way this was handled down there. Because, you know, it's the prosecutor, the people down there. He said, well, you know, the U.S. attorneys up here wouldn't do as awful a stuff as these had done. He thought the whole thing was shocking, just shocking. Then I remember when I called him and I said he got 20 years, he said, no, Dianne, no. He said, I have to sit down. I don't believe this. You ought to call Ed McTighe.
Yeah. What about the American Medical Association?
They don't do much of anything.
So it's not...
No.
Because you'd think to belong to such a powerful association as that they would have attorneys. No, not at all?
Well,
Did you
they
even
do.
try?
Okay. We talked to the attorneys of the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons. His name is Shafley. And he said, you know, it's got to be more of a big effort. He gave us advice for free and this and that. He said the thing to do, this is what we could have done if they didn't put him in jail right away. They maintained they weren't tapping our phones, but they knew an awful lot of what we were doing. He said to keep getting a continuance if he's, you know, living at home. But of course they put him in jail because they said that he's a flight risk because we were leaving here. And
wow.
we did.
So what do you think is the most, in it, all that you have learned, which is the most hopeful direction that you would like viewers to put their attention on? Petitions, letters to the editor. I mean, I happen to have Office of City Attorney General, city, town, and county, that we need to take back the government from the local level, because there's such abuses that are going on at the federal level that even those people of goodwill at the federal level are rather bereft of tools until there's more of a voice from the local level to say, don't do this.
I don't really. I guess if there's enough of an outrage here, you know, it's already been presented before Congress. Siobhan Reynolds testified to Congress about this.
About your case in particular?
No, about the cases of what they're doing to doctors across the country.
How many do you suppose?
Oh, a couple of hundred or more in the past 5 years.
A couple hundred?
At least.
That have the same qualifications?
Yes. No, not all of them are pain management specialists.
Not all of them are.
No.
But what do they get them for?
Overprescribing.
Overprescribing. Because when Molly and I went up to the medical center, because it looked like a prison. It was a big barbed wire and very scary. And one of the lady guards came out.
That's the way it is down there.
Yeah, and she looked very sympathetic when we described that we were looking for a doctor from Florida. She said,
"Where was this?"
This was in Lexington.
Oh, really?
She said, "Oh, you know, one of the pain centers, right?" And she sort of shakes her head. So it seems as though there are others there in that category.
It's another one down
and the
there.
guards know that these are innocent doctors.
Yes, they do.
You know, and I'm sure on a personal level they're very kind to them. But as far as rules were concerned, she couldn't let us in.
Oh,
So,
really?
Yeah, we tried to go in. So
What did she suggest you do?
She said we have to write somewhere and, you know, be approved. We'll try it again because, you know, Molly comes several times a year for the
See,
Patterson
you
Homestead.
can go in, but, you know, you could pretend to be a friend. And he sends your name in and you write it and they check you out. But see, you couldn't take any of this equipment.
Yeah, no. Well,
But I know they do because you see it on television. Per se is that we need a real thorough house cleaning in the Department of Justice. And Congress and the President need to do that. As you know, there's been other corrupt doings there when Gonzales was in, and the firing of all the Democratic U.S. attorneys. But they also, and there's been a lot of this written up in the press, and it was on television, about the Alabama ex-governor whom they set up for supposed bribery because he was one of the top fundraisers for the Democratic Party, and also another lawyer who's a multi-millionaire from Mississippi and was a top fundraiser. There's been a lot there too about him in the press, and that it was a false charge. Now these are all just being reviewed and reviewed and reviewed, but I don't know that anything ever happens. And it's up to Congress and the President.
So I guess the moral of the story is, if you look away at a little corruption, pretty soon it gets so big that you can have an esteemed member of society in prison for the rest of his life.
Yes.
Just for taking care of his fellow man.
Yes, because it suits the purposes of a branch of the Department of Justice to have that on their record. And to keep the funds coming from Congress. And this is the deed.
I just don't know.
And then you have a U.S. prosecutor who's had a checkered career, and this adds up for him, you know, all of these wins.
For myself, I want to keep an open mind about it because I'm so horrified by the story. that it just seems too fantastic that for the sake of a quota system, an elderly man would be put in jail for the rest of his life. It's just too staggering to me.